The history of audiology in the United States is the story of a relatively small number of extraordinary individuals, persons whose vision and courage fostered the growth and development of a viable new profession from a subspecialization within speech pathology. We are here today because of the unrelenting efforts of those pioneers. If there is a grandfather of the profession, an initial progenitor, it must certainly be C.C. Bunch. In collaboration with an otologist, Dr. L.W. Dean, first at Iowa and later at Washington University in St. Louis, Bunch, during the 1920s and 1930s, applied the newly developed Western Electric 1A audiometer to the assessment of otologic patients. In those years, the tuning fork and the Barony noise box were the standard hardware of hearing evaluation. In 1937, for example, only 10% of otologists had electric audiometers. But Bunch showed how much more accurate and quantitative the assessment of hearing loss could be if it were based on what we now call the pure tone audiogram. In the process, he cataloged for the first time the audiometric characteristics of many of the clinical entities of auditory disorder that we are so familiar with today. Late in his career, in the early 1940s, Bunch accepted a post as visiting professor in the School of Speech at Northwestern University. Here he had some influence on a young speech scientist about to enter the armed services. As a captain in the Army Medical Corps, Raymond Carhart was assigned to develop an oral rehabilitation program for returning veterans of World War II at the Deshaun General Hospital in Butler, Pennsylvania. With Bunch's teaching and experience fresh in his mind, Carhart developed at Deshaun a protocol for the fitting and evaluation of hearing aids that became the virtual model for clinical practice throughout the nation for the next 40 years. After World War II, Carhart returned to Northwestern and developed a graduate training program through which a number of well-known audiologists have passed. In a parallel post-war development, Hallowell Davis, a physiologist, left the Harvard Medical School to join S. Richard Silverman, an educator of the deaf, at the Central Institute for the Deaf in St. Louis. They were shortly joined by a former radio announcer with a fresh PhD from the psychology department at Harvard, Ira Hirsch. This powerful triumvirate at CID pioneered both basic and applied hearing research in the decades after World War II, laying the foundations for many current clinical applications. During the 1950s, two giants of the past, Wendell Johnson at the University of Iowa and Max Stier at Purdue, were to exert a strong influence on the development of our profession. Neither was identified as an audiologist. Both had made their marks in other areas, especially stuttering and related speech disorders. But both were influential in lobbying for federal support of research in all areas of the communicative sciences, and this support, in the 50s and 60s, did much to strengthen the scientific base of audiology in the United States. Today, we stand on the shoulders of these giants of the past. Here at Kiowa Island, we are assembled for the first time as an independent profession. We have never been stronger, and the future has never looked better. We have truly come a long way. In the 1950s, when I entered the field, there were fewer than 500 individuals who called themselves audiologists. Most worked in otologists' offices, carrying out routine air, bone, and speech audiometry. Others worked in university training programs, VA hospitals, or independent speech and hearing centers. Hearing aids were evaluated by the speech audiometric techniques that Carhart had brought back from the war, and patients who seemed like suitable candidates for amplification were sent to hearing aid dealers to be fitted. But we survived those arduous years and saw over the next 3 decades an incredible burgeoning of technology which has impacted every aspect of our field. In the area of diagnostic evaluation, for example, we had at our disposal in the 1950s only one technique, the alternate binaural loudness balance test, or ABLB. Today, acoustic reflex and evoked potential measures have expanded our diagnostic potential by at least an order of magnitude. In no other area has this increased sophistication had a greater effect than in the evaluation of babies and young children. In the 1950s, we were taught that audiometry was extremely hazardous in children less than 3 years old, and that valid results depended more on the skill and insight of the examiner than on the inherent accuracy of the behavioral techniques then employed. Today, we can test babies of virtually any age, literally from the moment of birth. Early detection of loss, that elusive goal we had so long sought, is indeed a reality. The heartbreak of identifying a deaf child who is 3 or 4 years old before intervention is initiated need no longer haunt us. The past 30 years have seen the flowering of a full-fledged profession from the seedlings so carefully nurtured by those giants of the past. But the price of an independent profession is not trivial. There are still many enemies to be bested, many battles to be won. And just at the moment, the biggest battle is with ourselves. As the field has grown in so many new directions and down so many new paths, some have run ahead so rapidly that they have lost sight of the others. We cherish the diversity that finds some of us in university settings, others in hospitals and medical school settings, still others in private practice or in association with private medical practices, and a growing number of us in the public schools. We find our work and our professional satisfaction in a number of different settings. Some dispense hearing aids, others don't. Some emphasize diagnostic evaluation, others avoid it. Some spend a good deal of time in operating rooms, engaged in electrophysiological monitoring. Others will have no part of it. There is a broad and growing diversity to the activities of audiologists, and that is all to the good. It strengthens our financial base, and it heightens the importance of our position in the healthcare system. But accompanying this increase in breadth has been a tendency for those who follow a particular path to want to redefine the entire profession in their image. Thus, some who dispense hearing aids according to a particular philosophy would like to insist that everyone else who dispenses aids must conform to that philosophy. And some who eschew traditional audiologic activities in order to devote full time to averaged evoked potentials want you to believe that what they are doing will define the field in tomorrow's better world. Still others firmly believe that the professional educational system is remiss unless it teaches principles of business accounting to the aspiring audiologist. We can and should argue these matters among ourselves, but there is an urgent need to close ranks, to suspend our differences, to present a united front when we deal, as we must, with related professions, with related professionals, with government agencies, with third-party insurers, and so forth. We cannot afford the luxury of intraprofessional warfare when the future of the entire profession is at stake. On this great occasion, as we declare before the world our independent status, let us put aside self-interest and unite under the banner of this new academy. Let us say, in a clear voice, to those giants of the past upon whose shoulders we now stand, your work was not in vain. We have built upon your solid foundations. The field you conceived is a reality. We the heirs of your efforts, are proud of the unified profession we have jointly created.